I don't think anyone is arguing about those two, talking about Georgia and Ohio State being two national championship contenders. That's coming from Paul Finebaum. But I wanted to dive into this a little bit. You talk about Ohio State, you talk about Georgia. Two of the top three programs in the country right now. I mean, I think Michigan has been a better program than Ohio State. And before you're triggered by that, just go check the scoreboard. Um, but what the future will hold is harder to say at Michigan. For Georgia, they are a field goal kick from not winning the national championship at the hands of Ohio State. And that was something that they narrowly escaped with a Peach Bowl win and a national championship that night in Atlanta at the stroke of midnight. But when we are looking in 24 going forward here, who are we missing that can challenge both these teams, first of all? And then secondly, where are the pitfalls for both Georgia and Ohio State? Let's start with the pitfalls first. For Georgia, the schedule is brutal. And I don't think there's really that is, I think, completely accepted by everybody who's got a brain. For Ohio State, you've got a lot of transition on the offensive side of the ball. They announced their starting quarterback this week. Will Howard, former Kansas State quarterback, may or may not have started at Kansas State this year. He's going to start at Ohio State. You've got a brand new offensive coordinator in Chip Kelly. So you've got a lot of moving parts. Now, they've got some time to make those parts fit together, but you've got a lot of moving parts. But the other thing for both these teams is, who are we not talking about on the national level that can win the national championship? There's not a lot of teams. I hear people trying to make the notion that, 7 to 8 teams can win the national championship. Ole Miss is not winning the national championship, okay? So once you start getting to that point, it's like that's too far gone. I don't see that. Ole Miss hasn't won the SEC since 1960 something. They've never played for an SEC championship in the modern era, which is the divisions era, and I don't recall them winning it in the 80s. So you're talking about they've not won the league in 40 years, and we're talking about them winning the national championship. I mean, I doubt it, but who else could be out there? Michigan. A lot of change there too, for sure. Texas, not so much change. Not so much change internally with the program, but you've got a lot of change in terms of you're going to a new league. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. No idea. Sarkisian understands it, I think, because he was at Alabama. But I don't think everybody in and around Texas, the players, it's just going to be different. It's going to be different. I'm not going to talk about playing, Texas Tech and Baylor and all that. There's bad teams in the SEC too. Baylor's not always a bad team either. So I think Texas certainly is going to be a troublemaker for everybody out there. And then, we don't know what it's going to be like without Nick at Alabama. We just don't know. No one knows. It's one of these things where we've not been here in a long time. About half the modern SEC era, Nick has been a head coach in the West. So he has been a significant part of what has mattered and so forth in the SEC. It's been. He's mattered in a big way. Now he's not at Alabama where he won, a slew of national championships. So Bama, I think for sure, has got to be discussed as well. But, I already talked about Ole Miss. I don't buy that. Just going by the AP poll, which is a poll that we have to pick, at Dawg Post. I choose to pick, I should say. We use the AP poll. We're not coaches. We use the AP poll. It's the oldest poll. We don't use the college football playoff. It's just that. So just for our purposes, we use the AP poll at all times. So there you go. But at 6, you had Ole Miss. We talked about. I don't buy any of the next teams I'm going to talk about winning the national championship. Penn State, no. Notre Dame, no. Michigan, I don't see it with that. Turnover. And this other one here, Florida State. I do not think Georgia Tech's going to beat Florida State. I do not think they are. I think they are going to cover, though. I think that Florida State is. It is possible that Florida State is the team in this top 10 that does not finish in the top 10. I mean, I think that when you look at, what you talk about transition, I mean, they've got a lot of it. Now, they don't have a very difficult schedule, okay? I mean, that's where we're at. But, you open with Tech, they should win that game for sure, no question. I love the way their schedule's set up. Whoever set this up for them in the ACC, and that's not sarcasm. I'm being completely straight. They have 3 off weeks because of playing in Ireland. They get 2 conference games out of the way right away. That is brilliant. Okay, you go away, you come back, you go overseas, you come to. It's overseas, but Ireland's as close to over here as you can get. Okay, overseas. So in Europe, I should say. So you play Tech. You don't. Then you get a couple of days after that. You get 9 days until you play Boston College at home. And then you're off, and then you host Memphis, which is a solid game, to be honest with you. And then you host Cal. You go to Texas for SMU, and then you host Clemson. By the 6th game, you'll know enough about Florida State to if they can win the national championship or not. But all the rest of these games are manageable for sure. I mean, at Duke, at Miami, whatever. You host Carolina. You go to Notre Dame. That'll be a challenge. Somebody on that. The loser of that game will not be positioned so high. Charleston Southern, and then you got you host the Gators. They're gonna have to play the ACC championship game. Someone's gonna have to play, and I don't know who that could be. Maybe Miami will step up, but I don't view this as like a wide open race. I don't view it as a wide open race. I view it as a Georgia-Ohio State race. And I think there are a couple other teams that can get around there. Why do I think that? Georgia's returning its entire offensive line except one person, okay, that started in the Orange Bowl, and played in the bulk of the end of their season because Marius Mims was hurt most of the time. They're returning allegedly the best quarterback in college football, so they got those 2 things. I'm just telling you, I know enough about their running backs. You hear from people, their offense is going to be very good. Defensively, yes, we've talked about this a lot on here. The defensive line, do they have enough depth? It doesn't sound like it, but I don't know if anything would qualify as enough depth for Kirby and them these days on the defensive line. The linebackers are really good. A little jumpy in the secondary because they're young, but they're good. So that's just a matter of time, I think. With Ohio State, they might have the best 1-2 running back situation in the country. They have really good top-level running backs. Georgia does too, for the record. So they both are really good at running back. I would take Georgia's line. I would take their quarterback. The receivers, probably Ohio State's are better. I'd have to look at that harder. Georgia's got good receivers. They don't have stars at receiver. There's no A.D. Mitchell. There's no Lab McConkey. So you don't have that, but I think Bell and Lovett. Bell could be a breakout guy this year. Dylan Bell, if you haven't heard from him or heard about him, you probably will this season. And then, for Ohio State, they can make the claim they have the best defense in the country. So, and they have a very good coach. I mean, Ryan Day is a really good coach. He's not won a national championship yet. I think he will win the national championship. I don't know when that will be. These last 2 seasons are not giving me a lot of optimism about my optimism of Ryan Day. But I think when you also you take a step back and look at the totality of this college football landscape, who is going to have what it takes to get through a 12-game playoff? 12-team playoff, excuse me. It's 11 games, but you're only going to play, a handful of those games. But it is more games, I mean, you used to play 2 games to win the college football national championship. Now you're going to play at least 3, could be 4. Who's got the wherewithal to play 16 games in a best case scenario, in a quote worst case scenario, play 17 games? I don't know. But I think the teams I've talked about, Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, and I have failed to mention Oregon until almost 10 minutes into this thing. I don't know how I skipped over them. Oregon has a legitimate chance to win the national championship in a way that, for me, Notre Dame, Penn State, Michigan, they just don't. I think Dan Lanning's got to become a better coach. What I mean by that is situationally, he has to be a better coach. I mean, Kirby went through this too and goes through it. I mean, coaches go through this. Everybody really likes to jab Dabo Swinney, of which I'm fond of doing that myself sometimes. But had he not, in 2016, had he not done a particular special teams fake, they would not have won that Orange Bowl game, I don't think. And Oklahoma was going to score enough points to win that game. But he made a great call in that Orange Bowl to get them to win. And then, the next game they played, which was against Alabama, Nick outcoached him in the third and fourth quarter with an onside kick and this, that, and the other, and Alabama rallied back and so forth. So you do have to make the right call. And so for guys like Dan Lanning, you've got to, that's a part of this job is growing into the position. Not, if Kirby were the same coach he was in 2016 and 17, I don't think they win the national championship. Just straight being honest, because, in 16, there were multiple times. So the game, obviously the game against South Carolina going in the half, a game that no one will remember at all. The halftime of that was dreadful. Going into, Georgia could have tried to score at the end of the first half against Carolina, and that was a dreadful performance by Kirby and his coaching staff. There were, in 2020, when you think about going forward on your own, like 29 or 30, I think it was 39 or 29, it just gave Tennessee the ball right there. Couldn't get a yard. There's times when Kirby's, in 17, the onside kick, I think to start the game against South Carolina or very early in the game. Sometimes, I think Paul Hewitt did this at Georgia Tech, their basketball coach. Sometimes you just if you got a bunch of badasses, you just got to let them play. You kind of got to get out of the way. And I mean that quite frankly with no disrespect at all to Paul Hewitt or to Kirby Smart. All those two things are not the same at all. Everybody's got to grow into the position that they're in. And had he been the coach in 16 and 16 and 17 maybe, but certainly 16 that he's become, they would not be winning the way they are. They'd still win a lot, but they wouldn't have gone the last three seasons losing 2 games or whatever it is. No, and have as many national championships as losses. No, that wouldn't be the case. So I think he's gotten better, and I think that's something Dan Lanning's got to do a better job, and maybe Ryan Day does too. I watch a fair amount of Ohio State. I watch Georgia more than anybody, obviously, in person, live, and in color. I would say after that, I probably watch some combination of the Gators, Tech, Clemson, and maybe Alabama, like all kind of bunched in together. This is off the, I'm just kind of going here. At Dawg Post, before we go to the stadium, there in our headquarters, there are 3 televisions. Every single television has a game on. When we come back, there are 3 televisions. They all have game on. When we're traveling to games, whoever's driving is driving, but we have a cell phone set up so that that the other 2 folks can watch the game and update the driver as to what's happening. Well, the driver can hear it, but we consume a pile of football. I watch most games in double X mode and on my TiVo, and then I just fast forward through I do the 30-second, and you can watch games very quickly. So we watch a lot of games, and as much as I see folks, Ohio State, they play early in the day a lot, so you get a chance to watch them. I think Ryan Day, for the most part, always has the better team. The vast majority of his time as coach, they have the better team, the better players. What I wonder is what happens when you don't have the best team or you have players who are similar. For Kirby, generally, they win those games. When you start talking about You know, just look at any of their New Year's Six bowl games or playoff games. I mean, they've lost one. They only lost one. No, they've lost two total. They lost one to Alabama in 17, and they lost to Texas in 18. Every other game they've won. They beat Oklahoma in 17. In 19, they beat Baylor. In 20, they beat Cincinnati. 21, they beat, obviously, Michigan and Alabama. And then they beat Ohio State and then TCU and then Florida State. I mean, these are not all the same thing, no question. TCU and Florida State were not in the same universe as Georgia, but they were playing them in those games, and Georgia absolutely made it look like they were not in the same universe at all, like, period. So he's become a better coach. Georgia has better players than they did in 17, for sure. Look at the quarterbacks. The running backs are not better, but the quarterback is definitely better. The offensive line is better. I would suggest that the tight ends and the running and the wide receivers are better. The defense is definitely better, not by a lot, but it's better. And so, the defense is better. No, the offense is noticeably better, I would say, because of the quarterback and the offensive line. The running backs are not better, but all of these things have gotten better, and Kirby's become a better coach. The adjustments that he made. I talked about 17. I mean, in 17, if he doesn't make the adjustment against Oklahoma, Georgia loses. So, even then he was progressing. But in 16, he did make mistakes. The Carolina game jumps out. I don't think you can, blame a coach for losing on a Hail Mary. There was some stuff that happened in that game that would never happen now. Georgia was just a different program then. When you think about the game with Tech, I mean, in all complete credit to the way Tech played that day, that Georgia probably wouldn't lose that game either. They'd just push on out and win it at the end, but they weren't at that level yet, and it took time. He's become a better coach. Will Dan Lanning? I don't know. Probably. I don't know, though. I mean, Kalen DeBoer had the better of Dan every single time they played, I think. Someone can correct me. I think they only played 3 times, and I think DeBoer beat him all 3. But I know he beat him twice. So so much of this is about all of those factors, but it's clear to me coming into this thing, it's Georgia and Ohio State. And then as there's a bit of a break, it may be that there's Georgia, a slight break, and then Ohio State. My suspicion is it's Georgia and Ohio State, then a break. And then how slight, I don't know. But Texas and Oregon are definitely, they can win the national championship. I think Alabama can, but I'm not as confident as I am with Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, and Oregon. And then once you get past Alabama, it's harder for me to buy that. Thanks for watching.